Days later, the vibrant chaos of Munchkinland was a distant memory, replaced by the endless expanse of Oz's wilderness. Their journey had taken them through desolate plains and forgotten paths, each step drawing them closer to their prey. Now, the edges of the forest of the fighting trees loomed before them, its shadowed depths a fitting prelude to the reckoning they sought. The enchanted eye warmed against her chest, its sudden heat a telltale sign that powerful magic was near. Was it the slippers, Glinda, or some other force lingering in the shadows? The artifact's whispers urged her to use it, but Malvaris hesitated. The eye demanded a cost when wielded too often, for now she relied on Varina's sharp tracking skills to lead the way. As they stepped beneath the forest's gnarled canopy, the air grew colder, heavier, charged with an unnatural stillness. The shadows deepened as the trees reached out, their limbs stretching and curling toward the witches. The forest watched them pass, its quiet hostility palpable in every creak and rustle. Varina stopped abruptly, her nose twitching. "The brat's scent is strange, wrong, like it doesn't belong in Oz," she said, her voice taut with frustration. Malvaris stepped past her, her tone clipped. "You've grumbled about her scent for leagues. How close is she now?" "Close enough even your weak nose should catch it," Varina snapped, straightening. Her amber eyes gleamed with the thrill of the hunt. "She's not far beyond the next bend, I'm sure of it." The path curved sharply into a wall of tangled foliage. Varina leaned her broomstick against a tree and adjusted the vials of potions hidden in her cloak. Her lips curled into a cruel grin. "When we've finished with her, I'll make time for the Quadlings. Imagine their screams echoing through their perfect little village. I'll burn it all for harboring our sister's killer." "Stay grounded," Malvaris said, her voice cold. "We need to know what's ahead. We're too close to Glinda's stronghold to take to the skies just yet." Varina sneered but said nothing. Malvaris pulled the enchanted eye from around her neck, the artifact's glow casting sharp shadows on her face. She tightened her grip, her breath shallow as the whispers began, fragmented truths clawing at her thoughts. The eye revealed threads of the slipper's magic, unraveling before her. Her gaze sharpened, her focus unyielding as she weighed every fractured thread. For all its brilliance, the eye was limited, its magic constrained to a range of a couple 100 meters, making it a tool for precision, not pursuit. "Dorothy and the slippers, they're in the village square," Malvaris said. Varina snatched up her broomstick. "Then we ride." "No," Malvaris said, her voice slicing through Varina's eagerness. "I want blood for Dracana and Zoris," Varina hissed, her voice trembling with fury. Malvaris said, "But we must be smart. We're too close to Glinda's fortress. It's less than a league away, and Dorothy killed 2 of our kind. We need to learn her weaknesses. Can't you see that?" At full strength, she would have relished the idea of Glinda crossing their path. Now, though, with the rot sapping her power, Malvaris found herself weighing the cost of victory and wondering how much of herself would be left if they survived. Varina growled, but lowered her broom. "For making me wait, she's mine to do what I want with." Malvaris nodded and said, "We will have her soon enough, sister."
For a moment Erin paused, his brow furrowing as a faint smoky trace of sulphur drifted on the breeze. A smell tied to old tales of witches. It didn't belong here, among the roses, but before he could follow the thought further, Farah's light, carefree laughter rang out, scattering his focus. He glanced up to see her slap Talus on the shoulder at some joke he'd missed. Erin grinned anyway, his daughter's laugh never failed to warm his heart. Erin knelt a few paces behind Farah, Talus and Uncle Greer, parting the red and maroon roses in search of the elusive blue bloom. Late in the season or not, finding it would be worth the effort. A perfect touch for tonight's celebration, honoring Dorothy, the girl who had rid Oz of witches. Ahead, Farah darted between flowers, her red braids bouncing as she plucked the brightest blooms. Her freckled face glowed with joy, so much like her mother. Erin's chest tightened with pride. Talus crouched nearby, gathering flowers for the celebration as well, grinning as Farah tossed blooms into his basket. Talus asked, "Think we've got enough to make it proper?" "The village square'll be a wonder tonight," Uncle Greer said, adjusting his heavy basket with a grin. Erin barely heard him, so focused was he on finding that elusive colour. Then Farah's voice rang out. "Papa, I think I see a blue—" Her words cut off with a sharp whoosh of wind and leaves. Erin's head snapped up. A gnarled branch wrapped tightly around Farah's chest, lifting her off the ground. A fighting tree, its bark twisted into the grotesque shape of a snarling face, limbs curling like snakes. Farah's free hand darted into her pocket, pulling out a small leather slapper. "Put me down, or I'll swat you good. Do you hear?" she shouted. The tree's grip tightened, bark creaking ominously, but Farah didn't flinch. "I mean it," she snapped, raising the slapper high. For a moment, the tree hesitated, then suddenly it dropped her. She stumbled but caught herself as the branch retreated into the shadows. "Next time, give it a good smack from the start," Erin said, grinning. Uncle Greer straightened, brushing dirt from his hands. "The baskets are full. I'll not miss a moment of Glinda's visit. Time to head home." "I won't miss the dancing," Tallis added with a sly grin, casting a meaningful glance at Farah. Farah giggled, her cheeks pinking as she met his look. She nodded, then turned to her father, her voice light and teasing. "They're only trees, Papa," Farah said. "Why hurt 'em if you don't have to?" Erin's smile lingered as Farah's laughter filled the clearing, bright and fearless. He didn't know it, but this would be the last time he'd hear it.
As they rounded the bend, two sights came into view beneath the dense canopy of trees. 3 Quadlings stepping onto the trail from the shadowy forest foliage, their heads bent in animated chatter, and beyond the forest's edge, sunlight spilling over the distant Quadling village. Red rooftops shimmered just outside the tree line. The chatter of a gathering reached Malvaris's ears, unmistakable even from this great distance, a testament to the unnatural sharpness of her hearing. Malvaris cast a sidelong glance at Varina, a silent question passing between the sisters. Varina gave a faint shrug, her wand held loosely in one hand. The 2 witches stood motionless, intent on letting the trio move out of sight ahead. But if any of the Quadlings hesitated or looked back, the unspoken answer was clear. They couldn't be allowed to warn the village of the witch's presence. A sharp pain flared in Malvaris's gut, the rot twisting inside her like a knife. She pressed a hand briefly to her side, her fingers curling under her cloak as she steadied herself. Varina, oblivious, was focused on the Quadlings ahead, her amber eyes narrowing like a hawk, locking onto its prey. Malvaris straightened, forcing her expression to remain impassive. She would not show weakness. Not here, not to her sister. With a shallow breath she pulled her focus back, though the ache lingered, gnawing at the edges of her resolve. One of the Quadlings, a girl with red braids, wrinkled her nose as if catching a foul scent. She glanced back, her curious look twisting into terror as her eyes locked on the witches. She froze, silencing her companions. A portly man with a basket of flowers and a wiry youth clutching another. Their confusion lasted only a heartbeat before their faces mirrored her horror. Malvaris and Varina raised their wands in unison, no hesitation. The binding spell rippled through the air, seizing the Quadlings where they stood. Muscles locked, their bodies became rigid, their wide, terrified eyes the only signs of life. Living statues trapped and helpless. Malvaris moved swiftly, her dagger flashing as it sliced the young man's throat. Blood burst from the wound in pulsing jets, flowing freely despite his rigid, spell-locked stance. His body remained unnaturally upright, frozen in place, until the magic released him, sending him crumpling into a lifeless heap. She turned toward the red-haired girl, frozen and silent under the binding spell, her dagger poised. "A shame you glanced back," Malvaris said. "But we can't have you running to the village. Dorothy could take 3 steps with the slippers and vanish if she learned of us." Varina said, "Wait, sister. Let me have my fun." From her robes, Varina withdrew the shard of obedience. Jagged and crystalline, it pulsed faintly with crimson veins, radiating malice as though centuries of torment were woven into its fractured depths. Malvaris raised a brow, her lips curling faintly. Varina had always revelled in cruelty, and the shard was her instrument of choice. Memories of their younger days flickered, How many creatures had screamed beneath its power? They were so close to having Dorothy in their grasp, she almost used her dagger twice more to end this so they could be on their way. But a thought occurred. Malvaris imagined Glinda discovering the blood-soaked remnants of her precious Quadlings. So close to her fortress, the audacity alone would sting the good witch's pride. Malvaris's smirk widened. "I suppose a few moments won't harm us." But as the decision hung in the air, she couldn't shake the sense that this small indulgence might ripple far beyond the shadows of the forest. Varina's laughter sliced through the air as she turned her focus to the older man. Sweat glistened on his frozen face, his terrified eyes darting toward the girl before returning to his own doom. Poor fool, Malvaris thought wryly. He worries more for her than himself. The shard's magic struck like a whip. The man's body convulsed, his right arm twisting with a crack as bone split through skin, blood pouring from the wound. His face drained of colour, sweat pouring in rivulets down his temple, his eyes wide with a kind of terror born only from unbearable pain. Another twist shattered his knee, the leg collapsing inward grotesquely, and though he could not move or scream, his trembling pupils betrayed the agony ripping through him. His left ankle snapped, the sickening crack punctuating his silent suffering as the shard's magic forced his foot to turn unnaturally inward. His shoulder dislocated with a hollow pop, the limb sagging unnaturally, yet his gaze remained fixed ahead, pleading for a mercy that would not come. The sheer torment radiating from him was almost tangible, his sweat-drenched face a portrait of silent horror. Varina's grin widened. Crimson veins in the shard pulsed brighter, as though feeding on the man's anguish. Malvaris's voice cut through the dark tableau. "Enough of your fun. Now it's my turn." Her outstretched fingers curled expectantly for the shard. Varina gave the instrument of torture a final twist. His ribs collapsed with sharp cracks, bone shards slicing through flesh in a spray of blood. His wide, frantic eyes remained fixed on the girl until the light within them faded. Though lifeless, the binding spell kept him upright, grotesquely defiant in death. She handed over the shard, its pulsing energy dimming slightly as Malvaris took it. For a moment her gaze flicked to Varina. The shard throbbed in her hand, its dark energy whispering possibilities. If Malvaris wanted the slippers, and she did, her very life depended on it. Her sister would have to be dealt with eventually. The shard would make it easy, quick even. No drawn-out theatrics, no unnecessary risk. A single pulse of its power could silence her sister for good. Had Dorothy been dealt with and the slippers secured, Malvaris wouldn't have hesitated to strike. But Varina would never have relinquished the shard under those circumstances. They both understood the truth. This would all end with the two of them locked in a final mortal struggle for the slippers. Malvaris turned her attention back to the young Quadling, dismissing the thought like a passing shadow. The girl's terrified eyes reflected the wicked glow of the shard, her fate sealed in Malvaris's cold, calculating grip.